They say when a baby is born, so is a mother. But while you are there to help your baby grow into the person he or she is meant to be, who is there to help you? Many women feel lost and alone when they become mothers, wondering, who am I now? Sometimes it feels like the transformation from woman to mother is as radical as a caterpillar's transformation into a butterfly. Did you know that inside the chrysalis, the caterpillar literally turns into goop before it rearranges itself into a butterfly? This podcast is about the goop, what soul transformation looks like as you transition from being a woman to a mom. Your baby's growth matters, but yours does too. You're not alone. I'm your host, Brittany Ming. Welcome to the Motherhood Metamorphosis.
Welcome everyone to this episode of the Motherhood Metamorphosis. I'm your host, Brittany Ming, and today we are talking to Ashley Pye. Ashley is a wife and stay-at-home mom to 4 kids under the age of 4. She became a licensed foster mom 5 years ago and has adopted 4 toddlers and helped 3 reunify with their families. After seeing the needs of all involved in the system, she has been creating and partnering with organizations in her city to help support kids in care, former foster youth, adoptees, biological parents, social workers, and foster, adoptive, and kinship families. So welcome, Ashley. I'm so glad I get to talk to you today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited too.
Yeah, so I have to give this background that Ashley was my former student and current friend. So we are good friends, and I'm really excited that you are going to be my guest today.
I'm excited too.
Yeah. So I wanted to ask you on here because I love your story and I've been following it for several years, ever since you started your training to become a foster mom. And I think the stories of foster mothers and adoptive mothers are ones that are kind of on the fringes of mainstream motherhood.
Yeah,
And I think
absolutely.
those stories need to be told more because they're beautiful and important and powerful. And I wanted to have you on to tell your story. So I'd love to hear your experience and what it was like for you to become a foster mom and then an adoptive mom.
Yeah, so I think, like you said, it's not talked about very often, and it was definitely not your typical path to motherhood. My husband and I really wanted to start a family, and after a few years, that just wasn't happening. And so we decided to take one summer and just say, you know what, full stop, like let's rest, let's not focus on parenthood and kind of just focus on what we need to do as a couple to just be content within ourselves and to kind of heal from that loss of a dream that we had of starting a family. And at the end of that summer, we came back together to talk about, where we thought we wanted to be moving forward. And we had talked about adoption, and we just didn't feel like that was the right fit for us at the time. We had also talked about pursuing more fertility treatments, and that just also didn't feel right. And so I distinctly remember sitting on our couch and just saying, hey, what do you think it looks like to be a foster parent? And it wasn't really a thought that we were having in lieu of having a family. We just thought, you know what, we have space and we have love to give, and we know that there's a need within our city. So why not look into what it looks like to be a foster parent? And so we decided that we were going to pray about it. And then within a week, we had decided to start looking for a new church. And the church that we felt like we wanted to stay at, the first Sunday that we were there, they announced that they were starting a foster care ministry and that they were going to be having info sessions at the church. And so my husband and I were like, well, if that's not a sign, I don't know what is. And so we decided to go to this info session. And as soon as I walked in the doors, I was like, you know what? I feel at peace with this. I feel like this is something that we need to be pursuing. And my husband was still pretty like, let's just listen and we'll wait and kind of see how this goes. And then about halfway through, we started hearing from teenagers that were in the foster system, just sharing their experiences. And I look over at my husband and he is just a mess. He's crying. And I was like, okay, I think this is what we're going to do. And we decided to sign up for classes and went through that whole process of classes and home studies and background checks and fingerprinting and everything else that goes with that. And the whole process took about a year for a couple of reasons, but pretty quickly after that, we started receiving placements. I think the big thing to emphasize about foster care is that the point of foster care is reunification. It is not adoption.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's something that can be really confusing and not really understood well from people that are not living within the foster care realm. So we knew our goal going into it was to help and support biological families that were in really tough situations and they just needed that little extra help so that they could be successful and be able to reunify with their kids and have a successful life as a family as a whole. And so that was our goal going into it. And we had a couple of little girls come and go and successfully reunify. And that was extremely difficult and extremely rewarding. It's hard when you bring this child into your home and you love them with your whole heart and you treat them as if they're your own because that's what they need and that's what they deserve. And you form these bonds and attachments with them. And then one day you just get a phone call and it's like, hey, guess what? They're going home. And that is a very beautiful thing to watch. And then you go home and your home is silent and it's heartbreaking, but you know that it's worth it because that is what's best when it's done well, when it's healthy. Seeing a biological mom reunify with their child is a very beautiful thing. So we did not go into foster care expecting to adopt. That was never really on our radar. We had been told from the beginning within classes, like that's not something that happens, especially with younger children. It's really rare. So we just didn't really anticipate that to be a part of our lives. And we were okay with that. We had some kids that came into our lives and we really worked with their families and their families, did everything that they could. And sometimes reunification is just not safe or possible. And that is a heartbreaking thing. But we were given the opportunity to adopt 4 little ones through foster care. And it's one of those things where it was a huge relief when we were able to adopt them. It was also heartbreaking. I think about their biological moms almost every day. I think about where they are. I wonder how they're doing. I do keep in contact with all of their biological families to give them updates on the kids because it's part of their family too. So it's interesting where, we went into this hoping to reunify and we ended up with 4 under 4. And not only did we adopt in these kids, but we also adopted in their families. And so it's really interesting to have these close relationships with their parents and with their biological parents and siblings, and to be able to kind of pour into them as we're also parenting their child.
Would you say that you have an open adoption? Can you define what your adoption situation looks like as you have this relationship with their biological families?
Yeah, absolutely. So we only have an open adoption with one of our children. The way that adoption through foster care works, at least in the state that we were living in, there really is no open adoption. Sometimes before termination of parental rights happens, you can request to go to mediation with the foster parents and the biological parents, and you guys can come together and work on an agreement together of, we are going to be in contact with each other this often during this month or this date. And that is something that does happen. And that's something that we fought for all of our kids. We do believe that knowing where you come from, knowing your biological family is something that's really important. Unfortunately, with 3 of our kids, that just didn't happen. Unfortunately, the parents just were not in a place where they were able to come to mediation and have those conversations, which is really heartbreaking because we feel that that's really important. So legally, we only have one open adoption, but we also keep in contact with all of our kids' biological grandparents. And we are in contact with one of our daughter's big brothers. We have actually known him for a really long time. And he was the one that called us and asked us if we would want to adopt his sister when she came into care. So we are very close with them, but it's not like a legally binding open adoption. It's something that we have chosen to do because we know that it's important.
Mm-hmm.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it totally does. Yeah, as you're talking, I was just thinking about this idea of like holding your kid's story and holding the grief that they may not even know about yet. And like you are the one who's holding their stories and their grief in your heart. And like that's part of like your motherhood story. And it's also part of your story as a woman, and like how the way your children have come into your life has shaped you as a person. So can you talk about that? Can you talk about how opening your heart to becoming a foster mother and then embracing these children and embracing their families as part of your life, how has that shaped you as a person?
I would say it has really changed me as a whole. I think I went into foster care being very closed off and nervous about interacting with biological families because you just don't know. You hear all these horror stories, right? You hear all these things when you're not living within the realm of foster care and adoption, and it can be really intimidating. And so I went into it, I'm just going to help take care of these kids, and I'm going to fight for what's best for them and their needs. And really, the longer you're in it and the more you sit down with their parents during visitation and you hear their stories, the more your heart just breaks for them, because so many of these parents are wonderful people in horrible situations. And so I really went into foster care and adoption learning, number one, the importance of being able to hold two polar opposite emotions in my heart at the same time. So being able to hold joy and grief at the same time, learning that it's not about me. Really, none of this is about me. It's, being able to put what is the best interest of my children first within the system, because there are so many times where I do want them to stay with me, but ultimately that's not what's best for them. And being able to acknowledge that feeling and then be able to let go. And I think the really tricky thing about foster care too is that I feel so cautious and opening up about it, not because I'm not passionate about it, but because, like you said, I'm holding all of these stories in my hands. I have my story as a mom, as a foster mom, as an adoptive mom. I'm holding these stories of my children that are pretty sensitive and tender and filled with grief, and also deep joy, and be able to protect their story. And then I'm also holding the stories of their biological families, which are also not mine to share. And so really just trying to find that space where, I am really respectful and loving of everyone involved, acknowledging that there is deep grief and pain within all of it. And also knowing that I have found great joy in it as well, and being able to meet these children, love these children, become a mom to 4 of them, and also bringing in their family. And so it has been a really difficult journey of trying to find that balance of acknowledging the grief and working through it, and also letting myself feel joy that I get to be the one to know all of these people despite such a sad and difficult meeting point.
I was listening to a podcast the other day, and it was Brene Brown, and I love her stuff. And she was talking about how joy often requires even more vulnerability than some of the difficult emotions that we feel, like grief, and like leaning into something that's joyful in a time that can seem, or a situation that can feel so tenuous, is a risk. It just like, yeah, go ahead.
I was gonna say, yeah, absolutely is. Like, the day that we adopted our kids, it felt so risky to feel joy just because I knew that something horrible had to happen for us to get to this point.
Mm.
And I felt a lot of guilt over it. And sometimes I still do, but also acknowledging that this is reality, it's happened. And it's okay to feel joy that I get to know and love these kids and their families forever. But yeah, I definitely agree. Like it took a lot of vulnerability to admit that I felt joy because that would be acknowledging that I felt happy during such a sad moment in my kids' histories.
Mm.
So being able to hold both of those in your hand and feeling that grief and acknowledging that joy while knowing that, while this isn't the way it's supposed to be, I think in a perfect world, kids would be able to remain with their biological families, but unfortunately that wasn't possible here. And so be able to move past that grief into knowing that like now my kids are safe and secure and still have access to their biological families, because that's not something every adopted child has, unfortunately.
Yeah, for real. I love how you're opening this up for yourself and for listeners, because I think that a lot of times people just see the happy side of adoption. Like they see the pictures on social media, or they see the happy anniversary of adoption day or whatever it may be, and it seems like maybe a black and white issue, like, or a foster care issue where we paint people in like broad strokes of good guys and bad guys, but it's not that way at all. Like people are people, and people love and they struggle, and kids are involved, and it's really hard because your kids came from parents who loved them and wanted them, and in a perfect situation they could have been part of their lives, and because they're part of your life now, there is a deep pain that has happened and occurred. And that's part of what you're carrying as their mother.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
I remember a post that you wrote on social media. I don't know if it was at Christmas or a birthday, but you said something about tummy mommies and heart mommies, and how you felt jealous because they were asking about their tummy mommies. I don't know if I'm telling this story right. Do you remember the post that I'm talking about?
Yeah, so it was actually a conversation I had with my kids not that long ago. We do talk about their biological families a lot. And now that they're getting older, we're having to find ways to distinguish who is who, because it can be really confusing, especially because my kids are 2 and 3. And so it's hard for them to grasp all of the nuances of our family at this time. And so we have started to refer to their biological moms and as tummy mommies, and me as their heart mommy or their mommy, because we don't want to alienate anyone, because we are all part of their story. And so it's true that that's something that I struggle with a lot, is feeling a little bit of, or a lot of bit of jealousy that my kids are not 100% my kids. I will always have to share them, whether it be because of, they don't share my DNA, or because they, look different than me, or, they have different mannerisms sometimes because of genetics, and their moms will have the experience of pregnancy and birth, and they get to hold those parts of my kids' stories that I will never have or ever know. And so that has been a big growing process for me of, I need to heal from that and let go of that. And also acknowledging that I have parts of them that their moms will never have. I get to live with them every day. I got to see all of their first milestones. I got to see, I get to see them grow up. And that's something that they don't get to see on a day-to-day basis. Like I said, I do send updates, but there's no way that a letter and pictures will ever compare to living in the day-to-day with them. And so there's this quote, and I will probably not say it perfectly, but there's this quote that says, "They are hers in a way that they will never be mine, and they are mine in a way that will never be hers. And in together, this is motherhood."
Mm.
I don't know if I said that exactly right, but that is the quote that I've really been leaning into, of acknowledging that we have both played different roles in their lives in the form of motherhood, but we are both motherhood and we are both their moms, and we get to have these experiences that are both unique and shared together, and that doesn't make one necessarily more important than the other. We both play really vital roles within our children's lives, and just really learning that I need to let go of that jealousy and grow from it.
Mm-hmm. I love how you are exploring these emotions and like all of our conversation talking about these complicated things, because motherhood isn't just joy and it isn't just happy shiny pictures. Even if you are a biological mom, like there are complicated emotions on the daily. I
Absolutely.
mean, we just had a chat the other day where you were saying I had a meltdown, and I wish that people don't talk about how much you have meltdowns as a mom. And I'm
It's
like,
scary.
true story, bro. Like we just had that conversation. And I
Yeah.
think that that inner life of a mother and these complicated emotions, whether you're jealous that you had to give up your career and you wanted to keep going forward, whether or
Mhm.
not there's grief that you were only able to have one child when you wanted a whole house full,
Right.
whether there's that you're afraid to lean into joy because your teenager has been acting like an asshole like all week and you just don't know if you can trust them. Okay, I'm not speaking from experience here,
Oh,
but
yeah.
not at all. So I think that those emotions, like those complicated emotions that you're describing, are unique to your experience. But
Mhm.
then, like, zooming out, your story and your emotions are part of this larger motherhood story that all mothers are leaning into.
I really think that all of these feelings, they might feel a little more magnified or intense because the situation I'm in is pretty intense. Um, foster care and adoption in of itself can be pretty magnifying, but I do think that you're right. Like zooming out, all of these emotions exist within motherhood as a whole. They just might be a little sneakier or less obvious. And I absolutely agree that this is something that I think everyone deals with. And I think as moms as a whole, we experience all of these same emotions and we just don't talk about them as much.
Yeah, it's hard. I think that sharing that vulnerability is something that connects, but it's
Mhm.
also something that feels really fearful because you're wondering if like the most complicated and tender parts of you will be accepted if you bring them out into the light. Whether that's we want to be accepted by our own families, by our friends, or even by ourselves. Like if I really bring this up, what I'm feeling, can I even accept that difficult part of myself and accept that whatever I'm dealing with is part of my story? So I think that us talking about the hard parts, whether they're part of foster care, adoption, or part of any motherhood story, is really important because accepting, I think, goes a long way to finding that joy and
Yeah.
leaning into that joy.
And I think talking about it too. I think it's one of those things like the more you talk about it, the more you realize how normal it is.
Hmm.
And you find a lot of comfort in that. And you also are able to connect over that.
Exactly. So, as we are coming to our last question, what would you tell another woman who is walking the same path as you did? Maybe another mom who's thinking about being a foster mom, or maybe who's thinking about adopting. What could you tell her to encourage her on that journey?
I think the biggest thing would be to find people that are in a similar situation, whether it be through your county, whether it be through a church. Find people that are living foster care, are living adoption, that have been doing it for a day and have been doing it for 30 years. Find those people because they will bring you so much comfort and advice and sanity, and that there's nothing that compares to be able to just find your people that have lived through this and be able to say, hey, this is what's going on, And not only can they empathize, but they can also give you advice on where to go, because foster care is complicated. Adoption is complicated, whether it be, because your kids are experiencing certain behaviors or emotions, or because your paperwork's not getting through and you don't know how to move that forward. Those people will be able to come alongside you and help you with that. Also, probably go see a counselor. Start seeing a counselor before you start fostering, so you can start working through things that you experienced as a child with your parents, or some hurt that you may have, if it's something that you have dealt with infertility or something like that. Like, you want to start working through that and then have that established counselor, so that way when crap hits the fan in foster care, because it will, you have that person that you can talk to and be your support and be able to walk you through it. Because foster care can be incredibly difficult, but it is also one of the best things that I've ever done. Every time a child has gone home, I have sobbed my eyes out and gone to my counselor and been, I'm never going to do this again. This is the hardest thing I've ever done. I hate it. And then an hour later, I'll get a phone call for another kid and I'll be like, I'll be there right now. Like, just give me 5 minutes to pack a bag. So making sure that you have those supports in place and having like kind of your village, your people that you can go to outside of foster care, will be able to really help you be set up for success. And I think probably the last big piece of advice that I would give is to do your research. Learn about the system, listen to former foster youth, listen to adults that were adopted, learn about trauma. Even if you get a newborn straight from the hospital, they have experienced trauma. That is not something that I knew going into this, and it's something that I wish I was a little more prepared for. So definitely start learning about trauma and the experiences of people that have been in your shoes or have been in the system before you, because that will really help.
That's really good advice. I was going to ask another question about support. For those of us who are not foster parents or who have not walked in your shoes, but still want to be an ally and a support, what could you tell us? How could we best support foster parents in their journey, or adoptive parents?
That is a wonderful question. And that's something that I learned a lot about from my church that I was at before I moved. They were huge supports for foster and adoptive parents. And I think one of the biggest things is just to be there. I had a woman who would call me every Tuesday and ask me how I'm doing, how are my kids doing, what are the updates that you need to talk about, how can we be praying for you, what do your kids need. And just to be able to have someone that was truly invested in my kids and our experiences as foster parents was invaluable. And that's something that takes very little time and very little effort. And going from there, offering to bring a meal to a foster family is huge, because we are dealing with caseworker visits, doctor's appointments, therapy appointments, visitations. Like, we don't have a lot of free time. And so one thing that can be really helpful is to offer to bring a meal or a gift card, especially on court days. We had families that would bring us like donuts if we had court in the morning, or dinner if we had court in the afternoon. And that just brought so much relief, because then we felt we could fully focus on what we needed to, and we didn't have to worry about all those little day-to-day things. But really just asking, if you start building a relationship with someone who is a foster parent, just asking them what they need, and they'll probably say that they're fine and they don't need anything. So just being practical and saying, hey, I would like to do something for you. Here are your 3 options. Which would you prefer? Something like that would be invaluable in a foster parent's life. And I know it really helped us. We probably would not have been able to adopt 4 toddlers if we did not have those supports that really helped cheer us on and make our lives work.
That's really good advice. I appreciate that. All right. So to end our time today, I have my 10 rapid fire questions that I want to ask. Okay. They're just for fun, and I'm excited to hear your answers. Let me pull them up. All right. So Number 1, which Disney princess would you want to take out for coffee?
She's not a princess, so I don't know if it counts, but I would love to get coffee with Mirabelle. I adore her. I think that she should become an honorary princess.
Oh, I think so too. I think she definitely counts as a princess. And Encanto has been playing like nonstop in my house. So I definitely would want to have coffee with her too.
Yeah, it's like think about Casita just bringing us our little cups of coffee and just being able to talk. I think that would be amazing.
That would be awesome. What's one thing you must have on your nightstand?
My depression and anxiety medication.
That's a good one. Yeah. My anxiety meds are on my bathroom counter, but I hear you on that one. Yeah. What's your go-to treat after the kids go to bed?
The darkest chocolate I can find.
Yes. An ordinary moment that brings you great joy.
When my kids want to cuddle with me, that is something that did not come easily for my kids. And so when those moments happen, they bring me a lot of joy.
Oh, I love that. It's like a little warm fuzzy in your heart and on your shoulder.
Yep, absolutely.
The last show you binged and loved.
Probably The Only Murder in the Building.
I started that because you recommended it and I'm 2 in and I really liked it. Though Aaron fell asleep and I'm like super bummed at him about that. I'm like, why did you fall asleep? This was going to be our new thing. Like stay awake, buddy.
There's so much suspense and twists and turns. Like you can't fall asleep. You'll miss something.
I know. He is like the champion of falling asleep. We're like, let's watch a movie together. And he's like, so it's
oh no,
it's not a thing. It's like a running joke with us. So,
right.
But I'm into it. So I'm excited to keep watching.
I'm glad you're enjoying it.
Yeah. If you run out of this besides milk, you have to go to the store.
Coffee, definitely.
Yeah, it's an essential.
It's for me and my kids. Coffee calms them down. So if it's not in this house, it's not good.
Yeah. Who makes you laugh?
Oh, my husband.
When you were 5 years old, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I always switched back and forth between wanting to be a missionary with a bunch of babies or being a marine biologist. And then I realized I didn't like fish. So
so that was out. So
that was out. Yeah.
Now you just have the bunch of babies, right?
Yeah. Now I just do like local mission work and I have a bunch of babies and hopefully a bunch more someday.
What are you looking forward to?
So my husband is from Colombia and we have decided to take a big family trip to Colombia in a few months. And I'm getting really excited about it. And then of course my kids are also obsessed with Encanto. So with that always on and planning the trip, I'm very excited.
That's really cool. I can't wait to hear about that.
Yeah.
All right. Last one. Finish this sentence. Motherhood is
messy and beautiful at the same time.
Yeah. That kind of sums it up. Well, Ashley, I'm so glad we got to talk today. This was a really great, enlightening conversation, and I hope it encourages anyone who listens. So thank you so much for coming on with me today.
Oh, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I love talking about foster care, so it was a pleasure.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Motherhood Metamorphosis. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe to this channel so you never miss an episode. Next, tell your friends. Podcasts are a slow growth type of social media, so promo works best when it's from person to person. If you know another mom who's in the goop right now, send her a text of encouragement and the link to the episode that is speaking to your heart right now. If you have a story about your own matrescence, the physical, emotional, hormonal, and social transition that occurs when someone becomes a mother, please leave a comment below. I want this channel to be a place where women can build community about the challenges and joys of their own motherhood metamorphosis. Thank you so much for listening today. I hope it encouraged you and gave you some good food for thought. If you ever have any questions, comments, or you'd like to reach out to me personally, you can email me at brittanyaming@gmail.com.
Oops. I didn't mean to do that. No, we don't want to end. Cancel. I need to stop video. All right, we stopped the video. Okay. I'm doing all this wrong. I'm recording all of this. So this is probably going to go in the blooper here.